Good afternoon, and a wonderful day here at Messina again. And we're going to be talking about a subject that I really enjoy and love. It is port. Let's start with where did port start from? Well, port started in Portugal, the city of Porto. And the United States had a big influence on the advancement of port because in the 1700s, when the British and the French were not getting along, and we had something to do with that, the British started purchasing Portuguese wines. Well, to get those wines shipped into Britain, they realized that they could do something very important, and that is to take a sweet Portuguese wine and add distilled spirits. And by doing so, you wound up with 18 to 22% alcohol that could travel well to England, and the British fell in love with it. As a matter of fact, they fell in love with it so much that they started investing in many of the port houses in Portugal. Well, I have two of my real special friends that are in my collection, and one is a Taylor Fladgate. It is a tawny port. People ask me what's the difference between tawny and a ruby. Well, tawny is an oxidized port, so it has more of a brownish color to it, and it ages extremely well. This is 10 years in the barrel before it was bottled, and therefore they call it a 10-year tawny. This will age 50 years. And then another great friend, a very special friend, less than 2% of ports in Portugal are considered vintage ports. Well, then, if you take a single quinta, which means a single vineyard reserve port, that's what this is. And this was a vintage port 2005 from the Quinta do Pascal. So this is a single vineyard vintage port. Very rare, very, very special for that amazing event. So those are my two friends from Portugal. Messina started producing port as soon as we got started. In 1977, we planted Lenoir, which is our port grape. In Portugal, they use some of 300 indigenous Portuguese grapes. Most of them are quintas or tintos, and they are very special to Portugal. Well, Lenoir is very special to Texas. It grows extremely well here at Messina Estate Vineyard. And the first port that we started producing was a vintage private reserve port, and we called it Papa Paulo. The reason why we called it Papa Paulo is if you look at the label, it shows a father and son working in the vineyard. And the father is teaching the son the artistry of being a wine grower. It's a very special label. Maurice Schultz did the label, and it's been something very, very important to Messina and our tradition. So we're going to use our Venturi, and you can see how beautifully this wine is. It has got that perfect purple color. It's our private reserve, and the private reserve is from 2017. We harvest at Messina over 4 weekends, and the private reserve is typically the third and the second weekend. So it's sweeter than the beginning of our harvest. Normally, when we harvest the private reserve, it's somewhere between 26 and 27% residual sugar. So then when you use the pourer, you look at the color on this thing. It is magical. And when you smell our estate private reserve, you immediately pick up chocolate and cherry. It is a specific terroir that creates that, and it is a sandy loam about 8 to 10 inches, and then we go into caliche clay, and it holds the moisture during the hot summer months, and we get an amazing amount of sugar and color in the skin of the Lenoir grape. So let's taste. Mm. It tastes like a chocolate covered cherry. A gorgeous wine, and it's something perfect with chocolate cake. We love taking this and taking old fashioned vanilla bluebell and pouring 4 ounces over the bluebell, and we call it port and cream. It is amazing. It is a dessert extraordinaire. So that is our 2017 Private Reserve Papa Paolo Port. Then, when we started distributing this wine, the port, we realized that some grocery stores, like Kroger, are not from the state of Texas, so they were not allowed to sell any product over 16% alcohol. So, we produced Ebony ports of call. We took our barrel reserve port and we blended a nice Zinfandel or a Primitivo to lower the alcohol below 16.9% alcohol, since our ports are between 18 and 22%. And we have this lovely non-vintage, which means it's not from one specific vintage, and it's lower in alcohol. And so as a result, you get this softer, easier to drink, less alcoholic ruby port. And that's what Ebony Port of Call is. It has a beautiful label, and it was a label that shows the shrimp boats down in Kima. So it really is something that really kind of signifies local. And that's Ebony Ports of Call. When you smell it, you still pick up that cherry and chocolate, but it's just not as intense. You're starting to pick up a little bit of the Zinfandel that was blended into it. And it has a lovely flavor. It's more mellow. It's softer. It has more of a characteristic of a wine as opposed to a port. But it's still that bridge right in the middle between a vintage port and a table wine, a red table wine. Now we're going to do something very, very special. And I want to explain a process that I invented way back in the 80s when the TABC said we could not purchase um, uh, distilled spirits. So we had to continue to make port. So I invented a process called sequential inoculation. And what that is, that's when we took K1 yeast, a very special yeast that can tolerate high alcohol, and I inoculated it on the first day of crush. And this is from the last day of harvest. So this is the fourth weekend of picking, and this is very intense. It is very concentrated, 28 to 30% sugar. And I inoculated it with the K1 yeast. And then a week later, I re-inoculated. And a week later, again, I re-inoculated. And therefore, I had young yeast continuing the fermentation, and it took it all the way up to 18 to 22%. So it is a natural fermentation. It does not have any distilled spirits in it. It is unique because it's one of the only port wines in the world that's made without the addition of distilled spirits or brandy. So now, this is a very special wine. It's 2011 Paolo. So it is beginning to show that little bit of tawny color uh, that you get as a ruby port ages. It's got almost a brownish color to it. It hasn't gone tawny. It will take another 10 or 15 years before it'll do that. But it has that gorgeous, gorgeous color. And you smell, oh, and that cherry has just become intensified, almost a licorice. and a very like a very high cacao chocolate. Just it really intense, and you taste so smooth, and that's the beauty of natural fermentation. Because when you add distilled spirits in the Portuguese ports, it takes 10 to 20 years before the ports marry. And that means when the brandy and the wine come together and they form a cohesive flavor. Our ports are like that from the beginning. So, on behalf of Messina Hoff and Mother's Day, God bless mothers. They're amazing people. I have the best wife, and she's been the best mother. God bless her. Salute, and have a lovely day.